You don't have to be the smartest, you just need to bring the right people together. School trains you to work for money, but entrepreneurs learn by doing and make money work for them. If you wait for permission, you'll stay stuck. In this interview, Roger James Hamilton reveals that success isn't about talent. It's about knowing your strengths and building the right team. He proves that anyone can win, whether you're a creator like Elon Musk or a system builder like Jeff Bezos. Stop fixing your weaknesses. Double down on what you do best. Entrepreneurship is a journey, and yours starts now. Special thanks to Jeff Hayes for partnering with us to release this content exclusively on our YouTube channel. And if you make it to the end of the video, put a hashtag Believe in the comments below, and we might feature you here in a future video. Believe.
Roger, I'm very excited to have this conversation, so thanks for coming in.
Very good to be here, Patrick.
So, boy, we got a lot of ground to cover because there's a lot up there in that head of yours, so I want to get as much of it as we can for the value of the viewer. Let's just start with your background. You obviously are a serial entrepreneur, as people will find out pretty soon, but what got you to become that?
Actually, I became almost as a reaction to the current academic system. I was studying to be an architect at Cambridge University in England. My dad always thought it would be great to have a profession. I loved creating, so I went down this pathway. It's a 7-year course. I went to the 5th year, and then I thought, you know what, like there's something better I should be doing or something smarter I should be doing to make a difference in the world. And that took me down the pathway of building businesses instead of building buildings. And I actually started my first business when I was in Cambridge, and because that took off and ended up being a company that evolved into a company of about 40 of us down in London, where we were doing these maps all over the UK. And that just led me down a path to Singapore. And then from there, now with multiple companies around the world, and with Genius Group, which is the main focus that we have right now going forward as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to plotting the path to Genius Group and what's happening right now. Did you have mentors that were entrepreneurs that got you excited about this, or was it just something stirring inside, or a combination?
There was one mentor, which is where this all started. And it actually, I'll tell you a story, because it's kind of an interesting story about how sometimes the things that take place in life are quite accidental. I was with my 2 best buddies in Cambridge, and we were in the very first quarter of Cambridge where they have something called the Freshers' Fair, where it pretty much is like, you're there as an undergraduate and you're getting to see what are different clubs you want to be part of. And we saw there was one guy, and he basically had a society called the Really Nice Society. And so we went up and said, well, what does your society do? And he says, oh, well, basically, I give you this badge that says I'm really nice, and I give you a Mars bar, which is like a type of chocolate in England, and it costs you £1. And we said, but the Mars bar costs like 50 pence and 15 pence, and the badge probably only costs 5 pence. What do you do with the rest of the money? And he goes, oh, well, every time I do this, I'll have about 1,000 people who will come on board. It'll be about £1,000. Then we go out and we blow it on a big party at night, and then we come back next year. And we're like, what? And to us, £1,000 was a huge amount of money. We're like, that's what he does? And he was very open about the fact that this is what he does. And he goes, but everyone's really happy with the badge, and they're really nice people, and so that's what I do. And so we started thinking, well, we need to be generating more money somehow. How should we do it? So we created a club the very next year, which was called the Asparagus, which is the plural of asparagus. It was a comedy society, and it just so happened that there was an American producer that had come to work with the Footlights. Footlights is very famous. It's where Monty Python got started. Lots of comedians like Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, all started at the Footlights. So he'd come to see if they could do a movie for him, because he'd done a movie with the Harvard Lampoon. He wanted to do one with Cambridge. Did not work out. He did not think they were that funny. He basically showed up to see us, and we were just having so much fun with our comedy society, and we were getting people to pay £1, and it was all, we didn't have a bowl or anything, so Mike had brought his kettle, and we were putting the pounds into the kettle. So this guy who came up, his name is Mike Braunstein, and he was a property developer from Columbus, Ohio. He comes up, I wasn't there at the time, Mike told me the story later. He says, this American producer came up, and he was saying, hey, look, I'm looking for someone who is funny that can do a movie for me. Are you guys funny? And Mike says, well, it's going to cost £1 to find out. And he goes, okay, so here's my £1. He goes, put it in the kettle. So he puts it in the kettle and says, what's this going to go to? And he goes, charity. And he goes, what charity? He goes, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Kettles. so he laughed and said, for that, I'll give you another £1, right? And put that in. So then they had this whole conversation. And then at the end, he says to Mike, hey, Mike says, I've got these other 2 partners. We could do something for you. What do you need? He says, well, I'm looking for someone to make a movie for me. I'm willing to pay you £1,000. I'll pay you that every month, right? And so Mike's like, okay. And so he says, so can we do a deal? And Mike says, you're going to need to meet us under the apple tree in Trinity College, 6 o'clock tonight, with a bag full of £1 unmarked coins. Of course, you don't have marked coins anyway, and we'll be waiting there. And so basically, Mike is, okay, I'll come, right? So this is big excitement. So we basically then met up with Mike, and Mike said, hey, this is guy coming, he's going to have this big bag of £1,000. We're like, what? Really? So we all got dressed up. I was in the rowing club at the time, so we all got on our blazers. We put on dark sunglasses. We all stood basically underneath this tree, and sure enough, Mike came along, and he was walking along, and he sees the 3 of us there, and he's never met the 2 of us. We're much bigger. Mike's much smaller. We were the rowers in the boat, and he was like the cocks, right? So we're all standing there, and Mike says, just be very still. I'll do all the talking. So we're just standing there, and he comes right up, and he goes, hello. And Mike says, hand over the money. So he handed over the money, and then he goes, what now? And he goes, we'll be in touch. And so he's like, okay, so off he goes. And to cut a long story short, this was the beginning of our entrepreneurial career, because this built a relationship where Mike Branson, who was in the US, he flew us out to find out all about the things he was up to, get involved in some projects. We got very creative in different programs. Every single month he was paying us, and we were doing this movie for him. It was my first experience meeting a multimillionaire. I'd never met a multimillionaire before. My parents didn't know any. And so when I saw this, and I saw it was so different from what academics were doing, right? At the end of the day, even at Cambridge, if you end up becoming successful, the next step is becoming a professor, and you get a bicycle to cycle, and that's pretty much it, right? And here was this guy with beautiful Mercedes car, huge house, and we're like, he's not that smart. What is it that's making him be so successful? And we asked him, we said, why is it that you're so successful? And he says, oh, it's because I'm not smart. And we're like, it's because you're not smart? He goes, yeah, because the problem with you guys is that you're all smart, which means you're going to go work for money because people want your brains, right? As for me, I'm not as smart as you, so no one's going to hire me. So what I do instead is I hire people like you to do the work for me. And as a result of that, that's why I'm rich, and that's why you're going to be smart, but not rich, right? And that actually made me think, wait, there's something in this. And this is before entrepreneurs really took off. Right. There's something in this about the fact that it's very true that academics need to know in order to do, but entrepreneurs need to do in order to know. It's almost the opposite, which is all through the trial and error, but it was so much more fun. I was like, that's the kind of life I'd like to live. And it was actually after being inspired by one of my mentors, Buckminster Fuller, and there's a whole story about what actually made me then become an entrepreneur, that then made me realize it's about who I connect with and the people out there who understood there's a different way to play this game. And it's one that can have a much bigger difference, which means you've got more purpose, but also you can have more profit, right? You can have both impact and income together. And that's really been the story of the life and also the teaching that we now give to entrepreneurs all over the world.
Yeah, it sounds like, at least on the last statement, this adage that the best way to help the poor is not be one of them, right?
Right.
So it's good to have some wealth so you can have some impact.
Right.
But it seems like, as you're telling the story, creativity seems to be at least one of the variables in the equation of the entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And maybe some people don't have that self-image of being creative. I mean, just saying, hey, I'm going to charge £1 for a Mars bar and a button, right? That's a creative thing.
Sure.
That and easy barrier to entry, £1, okay, people can put in, or the things that you guys made up. So creativity seems to be a part of it. But what this whole idea of saying, I'm not that smart, but I'm smart enough to hire smart people. How much does that thread carry through to the thinking of an entrepreneur who's going to create success?
So I think there's 2 aspects, right? If I take the part, first of all, about where you say, okay, if it's about who you know more than what you know, right? Then how do you even go down that pathway, especially because at school, we get conditioned the opposite, right? If we go and start borrowing information from other people, that's called cheating, right? So you have to do it on your own. So you actually start getting taught, I have to do everything on my own without the help of others. You're not going to find a single entrepreneur out there that isn't successful because of the people they surround themselves with, right? So we all know this, but that in itself is a need to say, I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room. I'm going to surround myself with people that I can be learning from and have this insatiable curiosity. But that comes back down to that first part, which is the part where you say, okay, like, do I need to be creative? Because there is a myth that entrepreneurs are born, right? That you need to be someone like an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs that is, super creative, and you're going to figure out how to do things that other people can't do. That's absolutely not true, right? Mike, my friend who was at Cambridge, he studied maths, and he was very analytical. He had a great sense of humor, but if he had to go create a new product, he never would have figured out how to do that. So he was much more like someone like Warren Buffett, right? Like basically Warren Buffett to say, I don't need to be creative, right? I can research, I can study, and I can find where the value is that I can deliver. Rory, who was my other friend, he was great with people. He never would have been the analytical person. He never would have been the creative person. So three of us made a really good team together. It was many years later I came up with a system called Wealth Dynamics, which has now been used by millions of people around the world, which shows that there's actually 8 different profiles, and every single person can choose to be someone who's entrepreneurial, even if they don't have creativity as one of their traits. Right? So someone like a Richard Branson or an Elon Musk, who is more of a creator, they'll be great at starting things, but they're not so good at finishing things. They'll make sure they'll have teams to finish those elements for them. I'm a creator as well, and if I had gone through my life basically trying to do it on my own, my weakness would have always failed me, right? Like anyone who's a creator is very good at starting things, but they're so excited about growing things. It's like you see the plant growing and you pull it up to see how the roots are doing, and you just killed the plant, right? So you find many people who actually are almost overexpanding companies, and especially when the markets turn, they don't know necessarily what to do because they're so optimistic that they're not already putting in place the things that are going to allow them to manage safety. But you have people like the Warren Buffett, and that's a different profile we call accumulator, that will always be looking at the risk and how do you actually find those opportunities to accumulate the right assets at the right price. Totally different way of creating value, but also very legitimate and very entrepreneurial, but it requires you to then connect with others that have different traits as well. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is that this myth that you have to be a particular type of person to be entrepreneurial, as opposed to realizing entrepreneurial simply means that you're choosing to create a job or create value more than try and get a job or basically trying to get value, right? And once you realize that, you realize even as kids, we all found ways to be creating value. And we kind of forgot it somewhere along the lines because we were told it's too difficult, or we basically found ourselves in an environment where most people weren't like being resourceful, and that's where we end up then kind of almost losing hope. We're living in a world today where so many people have got a second job, third job, the gig economy, where you can actually be making some extra money by, getting into a network like Uber or like renting out your house on Airbnb. There are so many different ways today that if someone wants to go and generate extra income and generate value, everyone can do it. But it requires a certain level of thinking that isn't taught at school. In fact, the opposite is taught at school.
So this is an important, I think, distinction. It's sort of a view of reality, right? And so your point is, the person wants to be an entrepreneur. It's a choice, not a destiny. Meaning, you're not born an entrepreneur. Somebody can actually get up and look around and say, "I want," and use this term, which I think is really important for this phrase. I want a different kind of life. And sometimes it's not within the experience of the person who grows up in a certain household and has a certain confines in their experience that never. Maybe they didn't think they had a choice, but does the whole entrepreneurial journey start with a choice, I guess is my question. Is that the first step before you go on to anything else?
I believe that the core to this is what is your main compass that drives you, which may not take a choice, because if you happen to be a child of entrepreneurial parents, you may not have actually made a conscious choice to be thinking the same way they think. But it's not a surprise that a lot of entrepreneurs do have entrepreneurial parents as well, right? But there's also many people who don't have that, but they'll see through social media or through friends, other people that are living a life that they go, that's the life I live. And it might be a conscious choice to have to choose that, because otherwise you're going to do what your parents want you to do, or your school wants you to do, right? So that you do have to make that choice at that point. But the most important thing about this is, if you're making the choice based on, is this going to be hard work, or am I stepping into the unknown, it's very difficult to make that choice. And so the way that I always find it's much easier is to say, what is your compass which is making your decisions each day into what you do? So for example, if your compass is getting good grades at school, then that's your focus. It's like, I'm going to get good grades at school. Or if your compass is to do what your parents did and become a doctor or become a lawyer, right? Then of course that's what you're going to be focusing on every day. In Japan, they have this concept called ikigai, which I always say, if you're going to be entrepreneurial, use this concept of ikigai as your compass, right? So what is ikigai? It's basically the intersection of 4 things which make up the concept of your purpose in life. So ikigai means purpose in life, or more like meaningful purpose in life, right? And it comes down to 4 things. One is your passions, which is to what extent are you every day choosing to do things that actually drive you because you love doing them, right? You do them even without the money because it's actually what you find most enjoyable and energizes you the most. Some people, their passion is getting fit and being healthy. Some people, their passions are being around people, right? Some are like, okay, creating new things and new ways, or being around smart people. Whatever it is that's your passion, it's your passion. It's something that's right for you. This then interlinks with what is your purpose, which is what the world needs. And there's very specific things out there that people can get connected to, whether it's supporting the environment, whether it's supporting their local community. But once they do that, you suddenly have a way to connect with others that have that same purpose. So it's not just about you being passionate and doing something you love. You're now connecting to people to do what you love in a way that's meaningful. Connect that to the third thing, which is your talents, which is what you do best. And we all have a natural way to do something that people want to come work with us, where we don't even really have to think about it. It's just naturally what we're best at. And finally, what you get paid for. So what you get paid for is where you actually now have a vocation, which is not every day waking up into your day's work, it's waking up into your life's work, right? It's like you've now got all 4 together. And if you say, that's going to be my compass, right? Not I'm going to go out and just get a job that I don't enjoy until I can retire, but it's like, no, I'm going to go out and find a way to actually spend every day, yes, earning money for my life, but this is my life. This is what I love to do because it's my passions, it's my purpose, it's my talents, and it's my business model or my earning capability altogether. We're seeing people out there today who are in their 20s and they're figuring out how to make money from their investment portfolio, right? We're seeing people out there who have gone out to make a difference in India or Africa, and they're earning more than enough money through basically the side jobs and things they're doing, that's what they want to do. But if you start with this being the key, then it takes you back to a different way of learning, which is the almost opposite of what the industrial education system gives us. Industrial education system is based on kind of like 3 things, which is calculation, and it is memorization, and it's literacy, right? Those 3 things. So it's like maths, and it's English, and then it's basically how do you actually pass exams. And the thing about these 3 things is computers already beat us at all 3, right? Computers are better at calculation, they're better at memorization, they remember everything, and even literacy now with AI, they're even better at actually formulating, sentences than we can. But if you go back to the Renaissance, they had a different 3 things called the trivium, which was all about self-awareness. So it's like, how much do I know who I am? Self-mastery, which is how do I become the best version of myself? And self-expression, which is how do I express this, whether it's through business, whether it's through my art, whether it's through being a guitar player or a YouTuber or whatever it is that links to your ikigai. Once you start with that being your pathway, you're already on an entrepreneurial journey, right? Because an entrepreneurial journey is about this idea of how do we form our own path in a way that will be getting us to be the best version of us we can be, right? The best self-expression we can be as well. Just one thing, if I can add, in terms of this idea of where the word entrepreneur comes from. Entrepreneur comes from a French verb, which is entreprendre, which means to go on an undertaking or to go on a journey, a quest. And so I always say that your current size of your life is directly related to the size of the questions you're asking. So if your biggest question today is what I'm going to have for lunch, that's going to be the size of your life, right? But if your biggest question today is how do we get to Mars, you're going to be living a very different life.
Right.
So I think one of the biggest things about this is when you start thinking, okay, am I actually on a quest? Am I joining someone else's quest, right? And that's the whole idea of entrepreneur. Or the past participle is entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is where you get the word enterprise. So like the USS Enterprise in Star Trek is like going where no man's gone before, right? It's this big adventure. So if you start with that mindset, which is like, yes, my life is going to be this big adventure, you're already on this entrepreneurial journey, and that's where the word entrepreneur comes from.
Do you feel that everybody has some type of genius in them? That nobody is born without some special gift?
I definitely do. I mean, that's obviously a big reason that we called our group Genius Group, because there is something at the core of everybody that we all have unique to ourselves. The word genius comes from genie. Genie is the whole concept of there being an actual living quality within everything. In fact, if you go right back to Mesopotamia, like the ancient civilizations would say, there's a genie in a chair, right? There's a genie in a table, there's a genie in a house, there's a genie in every human as well. So this idea that each of us have a genie, and this genie, you rub the lamp and your wishes come true, when you actually tune into what you naturally do best, and you start getting involved in something where others are igniting your genius, and you can also ignite the genius of others, then you see people's eyes really light up. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't have a genius. The problem is most people are spending their time trying to do all the things they're not so good at, and as a result, they don't realize, or they're taking for granted whatever it is that's their true genius already.
It's actually debilitating, isn't it? If you're getting up and doing something every day that's not a strength for you and a weakness that you it starts to erode your self-image. I imagine, your self-confidence.
Right. When I was at school, I actually found it hard work because I was great at art. Right. I was very creative. I loved art. I got A's in art without even trying, but my parents and my teachers weren't really focusing at my art, right? They were focusing at the fact that I was getting a D in French. So they were like, why are you so bad at French? And I was actually having to give up art classes to take more French classes, right? So this, I think everyone's got a story about how we've had to focus at some point on our weakness. Why? Like, why would I need to do that when there's always going to be a way that I can find someone who's got a strength where I'm weak? But this is where most people get it wrong, is that they like, if it's art or whatever it is that they're great at, if it's not recognized as being something they're great at, then it's going to be the opposite. Yeah. Even more so when you start realizing that every light has a shadow. And so when my daughter Kathleen, when she first took our wealth dynamics test, and it came out as star, right? And a star is someone like a Beyonce or an Oprah Winfrey, is someone who's very good at being able to connect with the audience and to be able to be personifying, their personal brand and who they are. And they'll be able to shine a light on other people's products. I mean, there's so much that goes into someone who's a star. In her case, when she found out she was a star, she was like, so what does that mean, Dad? Right? And at this point, she was still at primary school. And I think she was like 9 years old when she took the test. And I said, oh, what it means is that you're being teased for being loudmouth, right? And she goes, how did you know, right? And my son Luke, he did it, and he came out as an accumulator, right? And he goes, what does that mean? I said, well, that means that you're being teased for being a nerd. And he goes, how did you know, right? And so that's when my daughter came to me and says, oh, so you're saying what everyone gets teased for is their weakness, but that means if I know what someone's getting teased for, I can know what their strength is. I said, exactly. So when she started putting a team together for one of the school projects, and there was one girl getting teased for being a nerd, she goes, can you come and do my finances on the project, right? And someone else came in and was like, always like daydreaming. It's like, can you come in and help me with the creativity? And she really got it, as most kids do intuitively, that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And when you're in the schoolyard, usually you're getting teased for your weaknesses. But when you realize, as long as you're focusing on the weakness, you're never going to be actually able to grow your strength. So I think that's a really, really important part as well, is that until you actually put your identity not on where you're weak and where you can't do things, but back to where it should be, which is where you're strong, right? And not worry about the fact you're weak, because everyone's got flaws, but that's actually your superpower, then that changes everything in terms of what you then double down on.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're a fan of the question, what type of genius are you? So is it wealth dynamics, that assessment, that determines that or helps you understand that?
Yep, absolutely. What's so interesting about this, I mean, a lot of the philosophies that we use within our network, within our group, which is now over 4 million entrepreneurs around the world, is based on Chinese philosophy, based on Indian, Asian philosophies, because in the East there is a really powerful concept which is called the I Ching, which is the Book of Changes, which is a concept that everything tunes in to time. And I think in some ways we've forgotten that, especially in the Western world where things are moving so quickly, the fact that your winning formula becomes a losing formula. And so if you actually take the seasons, right, which is the basis of this, there are these different geniuses that connect to the seasons. And again, this isn't something I came up with. This is something that goes right back to Aristotle's time, at the time when they were looking at the different energies. This actually is what Carl Jung was looking at when he looked at different psychometric types. And fundamentally, there are 4 different geniuses. There's dynamo genius, which is very much like spring energy, which are people who have their head in the clouds, very, very good at being creative, coming up with new things. And we have a number of profiles on a square that link to that, like creators and stars. Then you have the summer energy, which is the fire energy. And this is the energy of what happens when you have creativity, like the wood will turn into fire. So someone like a Steve Ballmer, who became a billionaire because he worked with Bill Gates. So Steve Ballmer works with Bill Gates on basically creating more wood to turn into fire. And there's many examples of people who are like supporters, deal makers, that never had to be creative, but are so good at people that they're able to ignite those ideas and be able to grow them. And then you then have the earth energy, which is the autumn energy. That's where you find like the traders and the accumulators. They have their head to the ground, not their ear to the sky. And the thing about the people who are down here is that they already know, as long as they can see the balance of time, they can make their money from timing. They don't have to make it from innovation. And so from there, you then have the final ones, which is the steel energy. That's where you've got the metal energy or the winter. You've got the lords who are like landlords. They can make money from the finances. You've got also the mechanics. And these are the people that create systems. So someone like a Mark Zuckerberg or someone like a Jeff Bezos didn't even have to create a product. They just created a system that other products could be on. And once you realize, oh, there's these 8 paths that link to the 4 different geniuses. And we have a test for the genius, which is free, called the Entrepreneur Genius Test. We have one for investors as well. And when people do this, it's like, oh, not only can I see where I'm strong, I know what kind of team I need now. Right. And I also know what role models I should follow. Because if you follow a role model that is doing something opposite to what you do naturally, it's going to look easy for them, but it's going to be really difficult for yourself as well. So in the same way that when you see that there are people out there that can learn how to fly by simply taking the classes to be able to fly, there is now systems, including ours, that allow anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur to just basically understand the system. And just like sheet music, then you can play the music. Once you actually know the rules of the game, you can do the same with entrepreneurship as well.
Beata, thanks so much for being here and having this conversation with me.
I'm excited to be here, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
You have quite a background, interesting background. And what I don't know, which I'm excited to find out about, is how you got to be doing what you're doing. So let's start from, where were you born?
I'm originally from Germany. I'm born in Munich, where we drink beer and eat pretzels and are generally very happy.
Who could be unhappy with beer and pretzels?
I mean, that's my point, yes.
So when did you come to the United States?
I was, at the time, I was a photo editor at Elle magazine in Germany, and I have a creative background, so my only actual degree is photography. And when you are an editor at Elle magazine, there really isn't any other place to go. There's no like head editor, Uber editor, senior editor. There's nothing that comes after that. And for me to be 23 and then know what the rest of my life would look like was a terrifying thought.
Right.
So I said I was going to do something adventurous and do something that I needed a lot of courage to do. I'm like, I'm going to America.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that.
And did you quit the job, or was there a job with Elle in America, or?
No, I quit the job. This coincided with my dad, who was a CEO of a dairy company, getting fired.
Wow.
And I realized at the time that I was a lot like him. And I think he was a little bit of a jerk. And I think I was a little bit of a jerk. And so I realized that when you're in a position where people like you for your title, and they'll do anything because of what you do, but it's not about you. And I wanted to figure out who I was and to be appreciated and liked for who I was, not my title.
Did you like your work?
I liked the creative part of the work, right? I mean, these are colorful, non-conforming characters with brilliant ideas, but the business behind magazines is just like any other business. There's lots of rules and regulations, and people are at each other's throat because these are highly, highly desirable jobs. So I liked it, but not enough to wanting to stay.
So where did you go in the United States?
I went first to Key West. I lived on a houseboat without water and electricity.
You're going to have to explain, out of all the places you could have gone, how does it become Key West in a houseboat?
Because I had a friend, one of my best friends in Germany, who was my editor. So I was a photo editor, she was the editor. So she had a sister who lived in Key West. So we had gone to Key West and I loved it. It was so different.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get out of this high society, high fashion thing and just land on planet Earth. And so I picked Key West and a houseboat, no less, as an au pair.
As an au pair?
As an au pair.
Wow. Okay, so that's a start. And are you still 23 at the time, roughly? 24?
Yes, I was about 23 at the time, yeah.
So how long were you in Key West?
For about, I want to say about 4 or 5 months, and it was the best time I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, it was really I think about this from a perspective, sometimes we have to go to places where we really center ourselves and say, okay, what is it really about? And I had to get off this, crazy job that I was on where I worked nonstop and was always on, going to FedEx on the weekend to get film that was stuck in customs out, that was shipped in from some exotic location, and deal with photographers whose assistant had, thrown the camera off board. So I just needed to become me again.
Key West will do that, I think.
Yes,
it's a pretty
it did.
grounding place, right?
It certainly did that.
So 4 or 5 months go by, what happens?
And then I decided it was time for me to go to Los Angeles. So I look at Los Angeles like the city of misfits. And I say this very, very, very lovingly. So anybody who doesn't fit anywhere else, that's the place to go. And somehow magically they fit in. So I always felt that there was a vibe that really resonated with me. And so I went to Los Angeles and I started, I got a job at an artist representation company that was doing hair and makeup. And then I opened a photography representation division for them, and then eventually a still photography production business.
So talk to me about this. So you opened up, I guess, you were representing photographers as far as being their manager, or?
Yes, I was the manager,
Okay.
exactly, the agent, yes.
And then you left that to start your own business.
Well, I left it. It wasn't so voluntarily, though, because not unlike on what we're seeing right now, there was a massive recession. There had been civil unrests. There was a lot going on. And so the owner just couldn't afford this division anymore. So he wanted to focus on his hair and makeup and let the photography and the production business, which basically was me, go to get rid of the expense and the overhead. And so, I'm here with a 6-month-old baby.
Wow.
And I've just been laid off in a massive recession where I think I'm completely unemployable. And he says, just take the business with you. Good luck. And that was it. And that's how I started as an entrepreneur.
What year was this about?
That was in the year 1992.
Yeah, that was a weird time in LA back then. So,
It was brutal.
Yeah. So you said, okay, you never ran your own business before.
How hard can it be?
Famous last words, right?
I'm like, this is like one of my philosophies, Patrick. So I'm like, somebody's doing it, so it must be possible. If it is possible, it must be possible for me. Then the question is not, can I do it? Then the question is, how can I do it?
Right. Then you figured it out?
I figured it out.
So what was that like? You basically, you're on your own. Did you work out of your apartment? Did you find office space?
No, I had a small office space. I think it was like $600 or something on Melrose Avenue, and I loved that. And and over the next 10 years or so, Patrick, it was like I made a leap, and then somebody came with a frying pan and hit me over the head, and then I recovered, and I got to a certain point, somebody came with a frying pan, and I fell back. So we're talking about fires, the earthquake, floods, all the 4 seasons of Los Angeles, basically.
Right.
And I finally was able to get to the business being $1 million business, right? And I thought I had it all going on. I had to take courses at all these nonprofit organizations that teach you how to run your business, and I got it going on. Right. And then there was this moment where I felt there was a little bit of a vibe between my key photographer and my employee. And next thing I know, they are running their own business, which is my business without me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I ended up being in a lawsuit, and I had to sue them both for misappropriation of trade secrets, and invoices that I wrote were paid to them. And then that's when the really hard part of my journey began.
So talk to me a little bit about that. So you file a lawsuit. Did you settle? Did you go through it? What happened to your business?
Well, it's the same philosophy. If somebody does it, I should probably do it too. And how hard can it be, right? And then the question is just how. So I don't think I ever want to be in another lawsuit. It's like the most brutal thing I think anybody can ever go through. But so I'm involved in this lawsuit, and I'm not realizing how expensive it is. Because it's like, $20,000 just to write a letter. And then they respond. And then you have to write another letter. And that's another $20,000. And so it just keeps going and going. So I'm $130,000 in debt. I just lost this part of the business. But I'm having production season come around. And, I produced for Wrangler, Levi's, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, great clients. I'm thinking, hey, production season's coming. It's September, people coming, it's cold somewhere else. We're producing. And then September 11th comes.
Oh, boy.
In one day, it was over. I mean, no recovery possible. Like literally in 24 hours, I lost $500,000 worth of business.
Wow. So what did you do from there?
The lawsuit settled not too long after, and then I ended up with nothing. And so I came up with this idea on how to run a stock photography syndication. God has poetic justice, because the idea was from that photographer that betrayed me. That's, I think, sometimes how things in life work.
Right.
So he gave me this idea, and now I'm selling stock photography for architecture, interior, and all kinds of these, at-home centered stories. And then what happened is I had learned one thing, is that you may as well go after the A list, because if you have the A, the B and the C is going to follow. So whatever they teach you and they say, no, practice with the C level first, is complete BS. Don't do that. You just go straight after A. And these photographers that were the A-listers were working with the greatest architects and interior designers who designed the world's best houses and designed the world's most famous, places. So next thing I know, I'm getting these at-home stories from Julianne Moore, Simon Baker, Francis Ford Coppola, Seal, and they just kept coming, Madonna. And my photographer said, do you know how to sell them? Well, I was a photo editor at Elle magazine. That was my job.
Right.
So I built this whole stock photography syndication, global syndication, and then sold these stories into 97 countries. But I was broke. I had no money. So I was now $135,000 in debt with a brilliant idea at the right time, in the right environment, but I have no more money. Now I'm borrowing money to pay interest on borrowed money.
Yeah.
The death spiral of business.
Right.
And that's how the last really tough part of the story begins.
How'd you get past it?
I went to Germany to drum up some business. I went to a conference and saw if I could, speed up, the time it took me to get to break even. And then my father had a stroke, but my father didn't have a stroke. He had pancreatic cancer and he died only 6 weeks later. And while we are at the funeral in Germany and my phone rings, and it's my office in Los Angeles, and now they tell me that we're being thrown out of the house. We've just been served a notice.
Wow.
So this was then this defining moment in my life where I fell on my knees, I raised my fist, and I yelled at God, and I said, if you have a plan, this would be an excellent time to fill me in, like immediately. Like I may even have stomped my foot. And then I had to surrender. Yeah, there was nothing else I could have done. I mean, I wrote the business plan, I did the work, I don't cheat, I don't lie, but at this point it's game over. So I come back, have my bankruptcy attorney on speed dial because I'm like, I'm gonna have to make that call anytime soon. And then I get a letter from the White House.
The White House?
The White House.
Go ahead.
So I had written in my absolute desperation a letter to the White House. And that was because my former mother-in-law just wouldn't stop. She just like, you gotta write a letter to the White House. He's your president too. If anybody can help you, it's the president of the United States. I'm like, who writes a letter to the president of the United States?
What did the letter say?
It says, you always talk about the small business being the backbone of the American economy.
Right.
Prove it. I said, I don't know what else to do. This letter put me in touch with the Small Business Administration, not with some guy down here, but with a second in command, because after all, the letter came from the White House.
Right.
I walk in with my portfolio and all my pretty pictures and my business plan, and he says, I see you're prepared. And so they helped me, restructure the business plan, helped me find a bank who underwrote my now $135,000 in debt, that freed up my line of credit, that brought me 3 months later to break even. This is how close it was, Patrick. 3 months between bankruptcy and break even. And then 18 months after my worst moment, I'm the world leader in my industry.
So this is startling, and there's probably a few things to tease out. But number one, not only your own financial crisis, business crisis, but personal crisis. Your father passing quite suddenly, right? Conversation with God, or maybe it was a one-way conversation, but you were.
I was not sure he was listening at this time.
But you were still shaking your fist.
Yeah, but I was like,
Yeah.
really?
And it's kind of out of the blue, right? I mean, you'd sent this note in a bottle to the White House. What do you think would have happened if you didn't send that letter or the White House didn't respond?
This is like one of those things where now that I talk a lot about entrepreneurship and I teach a lot of entrepreneurship, where I talk about these moments of destiny, where you think you're in charge of the path. We think that, here's my starting point. This is where I want to go. It's a straight line from here to there. And it just never is that way. So we have only control over these two pieces, the beginning and the end. The path, we have to surrender. And I think this is the part where once I surrendered, not out of my own free will, but because somebody was such a pest about it, which is now the greatest thing that ever happened to me looking back, right? I mean, thank God for her.
Yeah.
But I would have almost missed it because I was so involved in my own thinking of how I was supposed to get from here to there, that I almost missed the greatest opportunity of my life. And so looking back or, talking about this, I think this is what we now really need to teach a lot of entrepreneurs. It's like, don't discount these like weird, odd moments where you say, who does that? Well, what do you got to lose?
Right. It's interesting, and the concept of surrender doesn't normally show up in the entrepreneurial psyche, right? I mean, it's like, you've got to run through brick walls, do whatever it takes, et cetera, just saying surrender. But I think most entrepreneur stories, at least the ones I know, they have at least one of those moments, in their trajectory where all was lost. There was no way out, that they could see, and something happens. Something happens, and pretty much, it wasn't like, they were working hard to work through it. It was almost like that moment in time where it's just a surrender, like, I'm done. I don't know what else I can do. I'm at my wit's end, and those are the inflection points, I think, that help shape the entrepreneur. So when you're looking back in this now, what's the lesson you took away from all that?
I think that there's so many pieces in this. So number one, I think the part of the surrender that even today, sometimes we will something to happen and it's not moving. And then we have to do the opposite of it. We have to lean into the uncertainty and believe that there's some force, God, spirit, universe, God, something out there that has your back. For us, it is so difficult to do that because we feel that we must be in control. And I think a lot of this is our programming in this world, that, failing is bad, making mistakes is bad, you get a bad grade, then you fail the class, and then you don't get into good school, and then you'll be punished in perpetuity. That's what a lot of society is built out of. But when we allow this to happen and these mistakes to happen, I always talk about this when you have a car and you get in your car and the GPS is outdated. And now the path that you normally go is blocked because they're building a bridge and now it's a cul-de-sac. So you don't get out of the car, throw yourself on the ground and throw a temper tantrum and say, they're so mean to me, I can't believe they're taking this away, I'll never find another way. You get back in the car, you turn around, you go, update the GPS next time, and you find another way.
Right.
So this attachment to failure is what I think prohibits a lot of people in entrepreneurship to get to the miracle, right? And I don't know who said it's not my quote, but somebody says, don't give up before the miracle happens.
Right.
And a lot of us give up before the miracle happens because that last stretch of the road is the toughest. Because that's when God asks you, point blank, how bad do you want it?
So you see it as a test?
Yes, in a way. It's an interesting concept, so test. Yes
maybe,
and no.
Maybe initiation.
Initiation. I say that people that work with me have been activated, and only people who have been activated understand what that even means.
Right.
So I feel that the work that I do today is a lot of accelerating and helping people to take these big ideas and then give them all the shortcuts based on all the mistakes that I've already made so they don't have to make them and get there faster.
So let's talk about that. What is it that you're doing today?
So today I'm known as the growth architect, and I help visionaries and leaders to scale their impact and grow their authority. And what that means is that I do a lot of strategy, systems, workflows. So I do a lot of reverse engineering. Is if they have an idea, I help them to figure out how to get there.
And it seems that you went in that 18 months, that you described to, from basically almost oblivion to leading your field, you figured out how to get there fast.
You do. Because at some point you have to give up you have to get very focused and very disciplined. So you come to a point where you say, am I all in? Because there was no other plan. There was no plan B. There was no alternative. There wasn't, I'm going to go back to my full-time job. There was none of that. It was this or it was bankruptcy. That was it. And the sun still rose every day, which was amazing to me, that the world continues while you go through these like unbelievable hardships. And then you say, now, what do I need to do? I can worry about money only twice a month when I have to pay bills. That's it. Otherwise, I'd be wasting the other 28 days on something that I just simply don't have time for. Right. Where am I going to put my focus and my energy? Am I going to, complain? And you said this. I actually, when I listened to an interview of you, I took it out. It's going to go as a quote on my Instagram. You said, you can't be a victim and succeed.
Right.
That's your quote.
Yeah.
And so that immediately registered with me because that, to me, is the essence of it.
Yeah.
I cannot be in this mode and say, I can't believe this is happening to me, and then go out and be victorious. Then I have to say,
So I'm fascinated by this idea of a growth architect. Can you give me an example of how that works, like how you can come into a business to consult and architect a growth plan? Like, what are the elements of that?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So right now I'm working with someone who has a digital marketing agency. And in this digital marketing agency, they sell themselves as a digital marketing agency. Now, how interesting is that when somebody says I'm a digital marketing agency? Like, not at all. Right. So you go like, what? Google links, SEO, and you go like, yeah. If somebody says something like that, you immediately scan this and say, I don't need a digital marketing agency. It's already over. So when I come in, my question is like, where do you want to go with this? So the owner says, I want to build myself to an exit, right? So in order to get to an exit, you need to get your revenue to about 3 million, so you get a higher value, higher return on investment and a higher valuation, so you can actually make an exit so that you can live off the interest. I don't believe that you need to make an exit unless you can live off it. Like, what's the point?
Right.
Like, it's just, I'm against that. And so then I listen to, who he is, and I pay really close attention. And this is like an intuitive process, and I go like, what's this person like? And he feels introverted, and he feels very deliberate, and he feels very no nonsense, but not in a flashy kind of way. So I register all these pieces. So then when they come in, when we work together, then I build this, I call it the unapologetic value proposition, the UVP, around him and his point of view, which is a lot of what you do. It has to be deeply connected. It's like almost like you have to hook it in the heart, because otherwise they don't have that fire. And so thoughtful, deliberate, Now, there's already something I can do with when I'm building that brand now for him. So if I'm taking the digital marketing agency and now I'm adding these elements of thoughtful and deliberate, now I already have 2 selling points that I didn't have a week ago. And so that's what I'm working on with them. So they come in, we whiteboard everything out, we spend a day together to really go in. It's like, what is this about? Who are you? Why does this matter? He said something that was amazing to me. He said, I want to make sure that he's a cancer survivor, and he had cancer when he was 20. And he says, and I'm feeling a lot of these after effects of the chemotherapy now. And I want to make sure that I leave something for my wife and my child, who are both totally taken care of and have great jobs on their own. But that's important to him. And so for me, when he said that, and I felt that, right? You have to feel that. When I felt that, I'm like, I know there's a purpose that we can now hook in what we are building and then build a brand around it that's a lot more deliberate than just being a digital marketer.
I'm curious on how you made the transition from your business that you had to the type of business you have now. What caused you to move from one to the other?
So once I had, gotten to the SBA and we had gotten my business to be the world leader, a Bill Gates company came knocking. And they said to me, tell us how you do it. Like any decent woman, I said, if you want to know what I do, you need to pay for it.
Right.
And they said, how much do you want? So I named my number, and they said, fine. So I had a multi-million-dollar exit. And I had, in all these years that I was building this business, I had gone to numerous conferences and events. And you're a speaker, right? So you remember probably the first time you saw somebody speak, and then you go, one day I'll be up there. Right. And so that's what I thought. I said, one day I want to be up there and tell a story, but I knew I had to have a story. Because you can't tell a story without having a story. And so once I had that, I knew I now had a story. And that's when I went out and started to build my next business, which was consulting. In strategic advising, and then I was sitting in a mastermind meeting, and then I had shared this idea, and I remember this moment, and the whole room went just absolutely quiet, like you could hear a pin drop. And then afterward, my friend Christian Bart came to me and he said, have you ever thought that God gave you that exit so you can do what you really came here to do? I'm like, oh, seriously? It's like when you hear the truth, and you go, I have to do this now all over again?
Yeah.
And but I knew.
But it rang true.
I knew I had a much bigger second call, and that was to help other people accelerate their ideas.
How much do you think your struggles contribute to your ability to help them?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. I mean, single mom, immigrant, broke, fighting, lawsuit, natural disasters, overcoming, resilience, courage, fear. I mean, you name it. It's all there. And it's interesting because that's what people really resonate with. And when we come out on the other side, we don't want to talk about that anymore because I'm finally past that. Can I just talk about how great life is? But nobody wants to hear that.
Right.
Because the story, she woke up a princess and things were handed to her, and then one day she was the queen, are just really uninteresting.
Right. So, but it equips you because, as I said earlier, many entrepreneurs, if not most entrepreneurs, really go through those very tough times. Adverse events in any number of ways, as you just described, can affect them. And somebody who's never been through that trying to mentor or coach, doesn't really have what they need, I'd have to imagine. Do you agree with that?
100%. I think that's probably one of the biggest issues I see right now in the internet marketing space is that, that anybody who's been a sales clerk at some company has taken an internet marketing course and now goes out and bombards other people on LinkedIn or other social media with these terrible clickbait messages. And then when you check them out, they've never done what they say they do. They just took a course. Right. And now they're taking somebody else's material and they try to repurpose it, give it their spin, and then go out and make their dream happen. And that's really bad.
Yeah.
I do believe that if you Want to learn a particular skill? Go to the person who actually has learned that skill and has a track record of success with that skill, not a wannabe.
Yeah.
And the trials and tribulations, 100%, because I've made so many mistakes, and a lot of really great ones too, that I can tell other people, no, don't go there, go somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess in one sense, the barrier to entry to becoming an entrepreneur has gotten a lot lower, as far as how for very little money you can have a reach, right? But simultaneously, to your point also, it creates a lot of noise, and trying to separate real talent or brilliance from people who are these wannabes who are, I think as you said, maybe taking other people's stuff and trying to repackage it and then spamming a bunch of people on LinkedIn and so on. It creates sort of this swamp you have to wade through to try to, stand out. What advice do you have to people who, have actually, a legitimate business idea and a legitimate desire and but they're sort of lost in that? How do you get them through it?
I think the most important thing is, and I know this is aligned with what you do, is to get very clear why you're doing this and what the purpose of it is. So there's two pieces you have to make a decision on. One, is it about money? And is it only about money? And there's not a problem if it is. Then it's probably only the person I want to work with, because that's not what I do.
Right.
Or there is a passion, a purpose behind it, where you really feel that you're making other people's lives better, more interesting, more exciting, relaxing, whatever that is, right? If you have that, then that's where you start. And you really lean into this. Why am I doing this? And you have to then follow that, people call it the North Star or guiding principles. And then you have to step in and you have to learn the skill. You have to get really good at what you do. I do something called a signature growth system. So I map out, like all the pieces that go into it. So I want, like imagine like you take everything that you know, and when you meet somebody and he says, hey, talk to me about entrepreneurship, you want to do your knowledge vomit. You want to vomit everything you know on them that you've learned in 20 years or 30 years, and you want to give it to them in like 10 minutes or less. And this poor person is completely overwhelmed, like, dude, that was like way too much. So what if we take all of that, we bake it into a nice slice of bread, we take a bread knife, we cut it into slices, and we say, here's slice number 1, that's phase number 1. Here's slice number 2, here's phase number 2. So that we have a client transformation journey that leads to predictable outcomes depending on where people are. So we have different entry points into our system, and we can service more people on more levels. But they're all going on the same journey,
Right.
From the idea all the way to the exit. And then you just have to choose with your particular skill set, which part of this entrepreneurial journey are you going to do? Are you doing the digital marketing? Are you doing the writing? Are you doing the, the system building? Are you doing the sales strategy? Are you doing the marketing? But that's, I think, the best way to look at entrepreneurship. Which part am I going to commit to? And then you either are going to go deep into a niche, or you build the system, you put an umbrella over it, and then that becomes the niche.
At what point is an entrepreneur ready for your system? Meaning, do they have to have at least something going before they're ready to try to plug this in, or should they be doing it as a part of their startup strategy?
It depends. I think that the idea has to be clear. So I don't do that. I created like a whole bunch of courses that are available for very cheap. Because if people like, what should I do? I have 50 different things that I could do. That's not my area of expertise. I don't have the patience for that. But when somebody says, I know what I'm doing, what's the fastest way to get me from here to there? And they have, they understand that they have to invest money in this.
Yeah.
Because you can't grow unless you invest in yourself and you invest in your systems and you're building this, and it costs money because you have to figure out what the pieces are that you're still needing and the technology that you're needing and then the people that can operate the technology.
Right.
So anyone like I work really well with people, again, who are colorful, who have big ideas, who oftentimes are not conforming in that sense, right? And go like, what about that? I'm working now with a woman who has a beauty line, who does lipsticks. And there's this one idea that I had when I was talking to her because of what's going on in the marketplace with women and the women's movement. And I said, we need to make lipstick about not being silenced. Because that is such an obvious, simple thing every woman can do. It's not controversial. It's not against men. It's not, but to say, I have a voice. I have lips that speak words, and I'm going to put lipstick on my mouth so you can see that I have something to say. So I see that, and she's a top makeup artist in the movies in Hollywood, like all the A movies. And something like that just excites me because it's so big and it's so audacious and beautiful.
Yeah. There seems to be sort of a spiritual aspect of this entrepreneur thing that you're describing. So often it's very seen as cut and dry, or dog eat dog, or very much about spreadsheets and numbers and profit and revenue and all those kinds of things, right? But I keep hearing sort of this spiritual dimension to the experiences you're describing it. So how do you see it?
I'm really glad we're talking about this because I think that is probably so often misunderstood. And Tim Ferriss, forgive me, but if one more person comes and says in 4 hours a week with an oversized sweater, a glass of Cabernet in the kitchen, they can make an extra $10,000 without ever lifting a finger. I'm not a violent person, but I may have to punch him in the nose. I mean, it just, the idea of this is your life, right? This is your entire life. That's all you want? Isn't that what Princess Leia said to Han Solo? If money is all you want, money shall be all you get.
Yeah.
That is boring, dreadful. That's misery. If I do this, why wouldn't I want to be excited about it?
Right.
And look at this from contribution and what can I give to the world? And, and I was listening to this audiobook, and the author said, don't make any mistakes. The minute you're not actively in this anymore, within like 5 years, everybody forgotten who you are, right? And that's probably true. But while I'm here, I may as well have a little bit of fun doing some of these things.
Right.
And then make this impact. So we have specifically this year gone into our mission and vision and our core values. And we looked at this, Patrick, and we said, what do we want to be known for? And we made our statement based upon the impact we help other people make. So my impact is measured, how I help other people to make their impact. So it is intricately connected to that piece.
Right.
So if I don't help you to make your impact, I failed as a business. So it's not money, it's not revenue. It's like, how many people can I help to make their impact?
Is getting to success, or are the rules different for a woman than it is for a man?
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. Can I just tell you how many times people have said to me, you are so emotional? And I'm really not an overly emotional person. Yes, it is.
Okay, tell me how it's different.
I founded the Women's Code. And the Women's Code was based upon, once I sold my business to this Bill Gates company, they asked me to come on as a global director of entertainment. And I did that, and I walked in, and I'm like, how difficult can it be? Other people can do it, so I can do it too, right? Same rule.
Right.
And I was watching this, I'm going like, well, when was this decision made? We just talked about this on Friday, and now it's Monday morning. What happened over the weekend that I wasn't privy of? Oh, the men went off golfing. The men did their thing. And women were sort of excluded to a lot of things. And I was watching this, and I'm looking at it, I'm like incredulous, because my dad told me that there was literally no limit to what I could achieve. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, are you guys serious about this? Is this a joke? And so I saw that what happens is that society is created very different. So if we go all the way back to caveman times, so let's say you would have to build a team to hunt the mammal. You're the guy with strategy. But you know John is the fastest runner, right? And Jim is the best shot. You're going to go deliberately as a man, pick the guys on your team that are subject matter expert. That has not changed until today. On whether or not you like the guy, if you happen to like the guy, better.
Right.
But it's not a prerequisite to build a team because you're very clear what the objective is. In the meantime, women were sitting in our caves. We went to to get water together, but we carried our own buckets. Now, if something were to happen to our, Patrick, Jim, the only way for us to survive was to make sure we took another woman's man. That's the only way. There is no other way, because we can't go by ourselves, hunt mammals, and we can build our own women teams and go. And this entire behavior, we still see at work today. It's amazing to me that women take each other out and men encourage it because it takes out half of the competition, and then men advance and women are still busy on the ground floor.
So you think women are too busy fighting each other?
Yeah, I do. That's why I wrote my book, Happy Woman, Happy World, to teach women you got to have a code.
So when you say a code, what do you mean? Like a certain ethic around how to treat other women? What do you mean by that?
Yes, so a code of conduct, there's an unwritten men's code. And women don't have that. And so I wanted to write the code and say, the first call to order is there's enough for everybody. And the real battle isn't us. The real battle is out there. If we change society, if we change how things are done, this is why we always fall back, because women are so busy with each other that they take the eyes off the ball, and by the time they recognize what's happening, rules have already been changed and we've gone back another 10 years. And now we have to recover the same thing. I mean, it's like we keep doing the same thing over and over again.
So is it, with men, are men a part of that problem as far as how they view women in business? Or do you think it's more the women, just the infighting between the women that creates the problem? Or, how do you see this today? Because you think, oh, we're past all that stuff now, but you're saying we're not.
No, we're not.
And so how do you what is the thing that's creating the pathological circumstance?
It's both. It's women competing on the same bottom level as they always have. We've definitely seen a lot of advances that are then immediately being undone. So in California, we had a mandate to put women in board seats, only for that to immediately be revoked. And then men go, unqualified women being now unfairly promoted into board seat. What makes you think that if 56% of college graduates are women, that the women that are going into board seats are not qualified? I mean, but that's then the counter force, right? That then says we're looking at the flip side of it.
But doesn't that also create the problem in a sense of saying it shouldn't be gender? The government shouldn't enforce what gender goes on a board, but it's actually the people who own and run the company that make that decision.
The problem with that is how do you change such a strong program that has been running for such a long time that's never really been updated? If I look at a computer, now if I had my original Mac, I could not plug anything in it because it's the original Mac. The business systems as they're running today are largely the original Mac. It's never been updated. It's been another batch and it's been another update, but the system has never really been upgraded to say, how do we need to build this new system that it's really creating equal opportunity? And there's plenty of data out there. I mean, it is not equal opportunity. And the best ideas don't come always from Stanford or Yale. That's the elite genius. That's like the classic, white picket fence, nothing ever goes wrong. And then he went to the best schools and he got all the help he could get. And then he associated with all the great people, and then they all went off and did something amazing. But that's just a part of the ideas. And entrepreneurship, if we're thinking about entrepreneurs solving the problems of this world, how can somebody who comes, let's say, from a penthouse in Manhattan and then ends up in Stanford, how does somebody like this can handle poverty? I mean, there's no association. They'll probably solve other problems.
I think that's my point, right? Is that having people in government who, for the most part, are completely, how can I put it, ignorant to reality. In other words, they're not accountable to profit and loss. They're not accountable to reality. They're accountable to their good intentions. But how can you have them trying to tell companies how they need to run themselves? It seems like the free market. So in essence, we have a problem. It sounds like, at least, the free market doesn't embrace women maybe in the way that it should. But is the solution really having a government mandate how it should happen?
I think the verdict is still out on that.
Yeah.
I do believe that those of us who have come out on the other side and who are now promoting entrepreneurship specifically, and who have seen where these ideas really coming from, and the ideas are diverse and equitable. The idea itself can come from anywhere. I think it's our job to look at who are these people that are coming up with these unbelievable ideas, and then how can we foster and promote that? Because you're absolutely right. Somebody who goes into government goes there for a very specific reason, right? Sit out 30 years, be on the safe side, get your paid vacation, your benefits, and then retire, and then die, right? And I may not have said that very nicely, but
I think you said it clearly, though.
but clearly enough. So then, where's change going to come from? Right. The change is going to come from the force that so many of us are then paying it forward. And this part of this second curve, like Arthur Brooks calls it, right, is about sharing and about connecting and about helping others, and us to help them to listen to some of these messages and say, that is a really good idea. Right now, I'm mentoring a young Black woman who started a business when she was 13, and it's called Stream Global. It's a nonprofit organization. She did that because she's out of an area, Palmdale, Lancaster, which is a little further out where the military base is in California. And she found that there is not a lot of opportunities job-wise. And so she wanted to help her fellow students in middle school to understand that there's other jobs than being a salesperson at McDonald's or going into aerospace or in the military, right? And so she came up with this idea of having these companies go into schools and sharing on what kind of different opportunities are in STREAM. And she's now serviced over 40,000 students. She's 21 years old. I want to get her in the White House. If anybody's listening to this interview and has a connection to the White House, please call me, because that's my goal for her, to get her to change education on that level. Because I think it needs somebody like her to come in and say, we have, 3.5 million of technology jobs that we can't fill because there's not enough people out there. She's got a brilliant program. That's an idea where I go, how can I help her?
Right.
How can I help her more? And everybody around her, they pushed her to me and said, here, take her.
Right, but it's entrepreneurs who
Yeah.
solve these problems,
Yes.
right? And I think that's the whole point. At least one whole point. There's maybe multiple points, but one of them is the fact that when we have problems in the world, government doesn't solve them; entrepreneurs solve them. They're the ones who figure out what's wrong, where the need is, what impact they could have, take the risk, and go out and make it happen. And I think to the point you were making earlier, she's on the ground there living it, which is why she can figure that out as compared to somebody who grew up in a penthouse in New York and then went to Stanford. They have no context, right? They can't figure that out. So it's to me, we're up against some pretty serious problems in the world, and maybe the gender bias aspect of it is one of them. It's hard for me to know and understand it. I mean, I work with women every single day, as an entrepreneur. I have my whole entire entrepreneurial career, but I haven't walked a mile in those shoes, and you have, and it seems that you actually, have agendas and initiatives to upgrade the way women exist in the marketplace. Is that
Yeah.
fair? Yeah.
I'll give you some examples. So let's just make this real. So what I see a lot is that these unbelievably smart and educated women just never have been able to speak up for themselves. So if I now take somebody who is still waiting for permission to speak, because even when I grew up, right, and my dad was the boss, but I was raised differently than my brother by my mother, not my father. Interestingly enough, my father saw what I was, and he knew. My mother didn't. My mother told me, men don't like women like you. You're too independent. You don't always have to speak. So I kept pushing up against this good girl. Good girls should be seen, not heard. Why don't you let your work speak for itself? None of this works in the real world. If I would have let the work speak for itself, I turned that into a strategy because I knew once I figured out how this runs, I knew they would never see me coming. I knew I could use that as a strategy to fly under the radar until it was my time. And I used that, but it was deliberate. Most women don't know how to do that. That's what I teach. It's like, if you are up against this and men will not meet with you because they don't even take you seriously, then how in the world am I going to get my foot in the door? The bar.
Yeah.
It was the conference hotel bar. That's how I got my foot in the door. Something so simple. I couldn't get the meetings, no matter what I did. And then we are all at the conference and all the guys are like self-bravado and then they all went to the bar, and there are no women at the bar. I'm like, oh, that's a great place for me to be then. And so I went to the bar, and now they're drinking, and the day's over, and there's no more agenda, and they're letting loose. And suddenly, I'm making connections, and now they're talking to me because I'm like literally like 1 out of 3 women in the entire bar in an ocean of 100 men after the conference.
Interesting.
And so how do I use that? But it's because women don't feel comfortable. Because they don't know how to behave, they don't know what to say. I came up with a rule, I call it the Cinderella rule. Always dress up for the bar, 3 drink maximum, in bed before midnight, and you walk to your room alone.
It's good to have rules.
Yeah, and then suddenly I got the meetings, because that's how I proved that I was one of them. But who teaches this stuff?
Yeah.
You can, it's much harder as a woman to get in that than it is for men, except men. Once you've proven yourself as a man, you're in. As a woman, you have to prove yourself over and over and over and over again.
If you look at, I guess, women entrepreneurs, I know several successful ones as you do also, but I guess I don't know what the journey was like for them to get to the point where they're at the top of these very sizable businesses, and it's really unfortunate that that it's different. But I guess when you kind of went back to the biological underpinnings of all this right through time, which I think is a consideration. But the last thing I'd ever want to see in the world is women being discouraged. Having a daughter myself, from being an entrepreneur or feeling like they don't have a great opportunity for a life of value creation and independence and all those kinds of good things that kind of go along with that. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and appreciate the fact that this is a part of your activities in today's world. And I think you've going all the way back to your story from the beginning, single mom with serious struggles, and you got to figure it out, right? So if you could figure it out, to your point, then I guess maybe other young entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs, can also.
Yeah.
So.
And I want to add to that, because I think what you said was really, really, really important. Number one is the encouragement. to say, it's not the same. That's honest. It's not going to be the same.
Right.
However, it is possible. If it is possible, it is possible for you.
Yeah.
If it is possible for you, then the question is not can I, but how can I? So I think if we bring it back to that, because I'm a woman, I love being a woman. I don't even want to be a man. You know, that's not this. And I've been called every feminist word on the planet because I speak up openly about this.
Right.
But what it is to say, can I own what I am? Can I own that? And can I use that? And can I use that in a way that I can look myself in the mirror? It's a lesson my dad taught me very early on. He said, at the end of the day, before you go to bed and you look in the mirror, there's one person that looks back at you and you have to like that person. Make sure you do, because that's who you go to bed with.
Right.
And that always stuck with me. So I think that's to be said with men as well, right? Can you own who you are? And then can you own that you are different? And I think if we have now this honest conversation to say, is this different? Yes, it is. That's really interesting. How will this affect my daughter? Well, it will affect her. Well, how? Well, because, she's up against this history, this program of a society that still has somehow inexplicably the same issues and they keep circling around it. But she has you as a dad. And now you're back to encouragement.
Yeah.
And then you say, you can figure it out. It probably will be, that's right, it will be your way. And then that'll go down in history as the way she did it.
Right.
And I think if we approach it from that perspective, and that ties in with what you earlier said about equality, if we say, what's that story to success, that'll be a much more powerful way to look at it.
Well, I think it's a great summary. I appreciate, again, you coming here and sharing all this and the work that you do in the world, and the encouragement that you bring, and also the example that you set. All these things I think are important, and I think they came together brilliantly right here. So thank you so much for being here.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me.
For another amazing entrepreneur brain interview, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I learned most people think they want to be liked, but what they really yearn for is to be respected and seen for their true potential. And to do that, you can't always be nice.